What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another podcast. I got a special invitee today. I'm super excited because I never had the opportunity to talk to a real doctor that focuses in helping people master their brains. And with the bold statement of uh, co- mastering your brain in 30 days, I bring you Dr. Philippe Douyon. So, guys, stay all the way. Make sure you like it, subscribe, and just follow whatever Dr. Douyon says, and change your life in the next 30 days. So, thank you, Dr. Douyon, again. Thank you for jumping and sharing with us about 20 minutes of your time and sharing how we can improve our lives with the most important tool that we have. If you want, you can introduce yourself with a little bit of background about your story, how you got started, and then we can jump from there.
Sure. So thank you for having me. I'm super excited for this conversation. So I'm a board certified neurologist. I'm the author of the book Neuroplasticity, Your Brain Superpower, and just recently launched the online course Take Charge of Your Brain in 30 days. And for a really long time, we used to think that the brain was static, that it didn't change, and that if it was going to change, it would only happen if somebody got really old and their brain started to degenerate, or somebody had some kind of traumatic brain injury. But we now know that that's not the case. We know that the brain is constantly changing, constantly evolving with everything that we do, everything that we think. And for me, what's so empowering about that is that if our brains are capable of evolving, that means that we're capable of evolving as individuals. And that means that our society is capable of evolving. And so, I think that's a really powerful message. And I've experienced that both personally and professionally. So I'm 41 now, but when I was 18, I was diagnosed with kidney failure. 8 days after graduating from medical school, when I was 28, I walked into the operating room to have a kidney transplant, and my dad was my donor. And I really had to take charge of the way that I thought about my life, thought about my health, thought about how I could serve a much broader population after that kind of experience. So I had to take charge of my brain in order to really uh, change my life. And
Wonderful,
I've seen patients do the same thing.
wonderful. So, is that how you got started in the medicine world? Because it's a really lengthy and difficult road, I'm sure.
Yeah, so the way that I got started in medicine and neurology in particular is that I had a cousin who had epilepsy when I was a kid, and I had a grandmother who developed Alzheimer's disease. And even though those are really devastating to witness, because neurological disorders are different than other medical issues, right? Because neurological disorders impact people physically, they impact people emotionally, mentally, they impact the way that they think. And so when you see somebody being impacted that way, somebody that you love, that's really, really devastating. But at the same time, when the brain is working the way that it's supposed to, when people are using their brains the way that it's meant to be used, as opposed to letting their brains use them, it's a really powerful thing. That's when people's lives change. That's when we see, uh, really wonderful things happen in our world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been following Dr. Amen from Amen Clinics for quite some time. Got to know about him from Dean Graziosi. And when I came to learn about you, it was from Mentor Box. I know you were promoting your book and you gave some really great tips. But before we get into all that good stuff, I like learning more about the individual I bring on because I believe that every person has a story yet to be told. So thank you for sharing, the story of vulnerability. um, how was the process of the um, writing that book?
Yeah, so it was really interesting. I was really inspired to write it, and I was really inspired by the patients that I was taking care of, right? And
Hmm.
oftentimes they say that as a doctor, you get more from your patients than you actually give to them. Their stories are so powerful, their resilience is powerful, their persistence, their ability to overcome the challenges that they face. And so I was really inspired to write a book about just the fact that you can change your life. It doesn't matter what diagnosis you have, what neurological problem you have, you can actually change your life. And that's because your brain is constantly changing and your brain is constantly evolving. And so I was able to write that fairly quickly. I was able to write it within a matter of about 3 months or so.
Wow.
Um, so every day or almost every day after work, I would come and just type away. Um,
Yeah, I mean that I imagine that's you applying all the concepts and principles you teach and you've learned through experience. That
yeah,
takes some discipline. Do you want to share a little bit more about that? How we can start transforming our brain?
yeah, absolutely. So the reality is that our thoughts play a huge role in our brain's evolution. So every time you have a thought, and if it's a new thought, it causes the creation of new neurons and new connections within your brain. When you think the same things over and over, it strengthens those networks that are dedicated to that particular thought, right? And so there's some scientists that have said we have anywhere from 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. I have no idea how they count how many thoughts people have, so don't ask me that. But out of those 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts we have per day, um, about 90 to 95% of them are the same exact thoughts that we had yesterday. And so we're thinking the same exact thoughts all the time. And then people wonder why their lives don't change, right? And then out of those 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts we have every single day, 60 to 70% of those thoughts are negative, right? So we're having these thoughts that are constantly repeating and they're negative. It's negative thinking, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't allow us to move past and evolve past whatever our current life situation is. And that's why it's so important to really, I tell people to become the leader that your brain so desperately needs you to be and to take charge of your brain. Because once you can take charge of your thinking, then you are able to take charge of the actions that you take. And then you're able to create the life that you want for yourself.
that's crazy. Those are some crazy numbers that I mean, just thinking, being aware of whether they're true or not, we become aware of, yeah, right, 70% of the time we're thinking about the negative things that happen to us. So a lot of people, face or are struggle with trauma, and that's why those beliefs form. What are some tips or tricks that you suggest to take control of your brain now, or
Yeah,
progressively?
yeah. So we're all built to be able to deal with short-term stress, and trauma is, I mean, stress and trauma are very much related,
Hmm.
right? But something that is chronic and something that is traumatic, it's stress taken to a completely different level, can have a significant impact on your brain, on the way that your brain is functioning, on the structure of your brain. We know that it can cause neurons to die in certain areas, and so there's certain parts of the brain that'll be smaller. It can make it neurons in the part of the brain responsible for making new memories not function well, and so people are constantly trapped thinking about that traumatic event despite whatever is going on in the moment, right? They can become really hypersensitive to certain triggers that, you know, within their environment. And so when people are acknowledging, first they need to acknowledge that there is trauma. A lot of people sort of walk around their lives and don't acknowledge that things are really traumatic, right? And it doesn't have to be big things like, uh, you know, emotional abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, being in a war-torn country. It could be things like walking down the street and having to step across somebody who's homeless. That is a traumatic experience to have. And so, one, you need to acknowledge that there is trauma in your life. You need to be willing to get to the root of that traumatic experience. And then having new experiences is really, really crucial because it moves you away from from the trauma. Right? It takes your mind someplace completely different. So that's really important. And doing things like therapy is going to be really important for trauma. Exercise. A lot of times we see that anxiety and depression accompany trauma.
Yeah.
Exercise is the best anti-anxiety, antidepressant treatment that we have. Right. So you want to get your body moving.
Yeah. I just had a podcast with the twins, Chris and Eric Martinez, and we were talking about fitness. And I told them, so many people don't realize that the gym is the best uh, therapy room, if you call it. So wonderful. That helps for everyone that's going to be listening. They gotta take action. Walk 30 minutes a day. I think that helps, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, they often say that doctors, we treat ourselves very different than we treat patients, right? And I know doctors who have really bad anxiety, who have
Mhm.
suffered with depression, and they don't take medications. They exercise every day. Whether that looks like playing a sport every day or going to the gym every day, they get their bodies moving every single day.
Wonderful. That's crazy. So many people don't know that. Thank you for sharing it. Do you want to talk about your online course, take charge of your brain in 30 days?
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
bold statement.
yeah. So take charge of your brain in 30 days. It's really to help people first and foremost get healthier, right, and create the life that they want for themselves. In this course, people are able to get to the root cause of their medical and neurological issues. They're able to learn about the importance of having a mission, vision, and purpose, and how that impacts the evolution of your brain. Because we know that somebody who's 90 who has a reason to get up every single morning is going to do better than somebody who's 60, 70 who has nothing to do in their day, right? So
Definitely.
having a purpose is really, really important. Um, we talk about the impact of preventable chronic diseases, right? Especially the impact that that has on the brain. We talk about becoming the leader that your brain so desperately needs you to be, as well as different neurological disorders. And then we also talk about creating a prescription plan, but one that's based in the development of your mind, body, and soul in order for you to get healthier and create the life that you want. And so, even though the course is called "Take Charge of Your Brain in 30 Days," people have access to the course for a full year.
Mm.
Depending on which package that they choose, they get online group coaching 2 hours per week with me. And again, that's for a full year. And so this is really to help people transform their lives. And the feedback has been really amazing.
Awesome. Awesome. Before, I mean, I love focusing on the stories. Do you think is there any story noteworthy you want to share with us? Maybe about your client, your patients, or
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah. So I'll tell you stories. So one of I told you earlier that look, I had kidney disease and a kidney transplant, and I always felt like um, it actually made me a better doctor, right?
Hmm.
Because I've always known what it's been like to be a patient because I've been a patient for more than half my life. I know what it feels like to look in the mirror and not recognize who you are anymore. I know what it feels like to have to take medications and have side effects. I know what it feels like to have to face your mortality. And
Hmm.
so, a lot of the amazing work that I've done with patients hasn't been because I prescribed them a pill. Anybody can do that,
Yeah.
right? It's about the connection that you develop with the person that you're serving. It's about figuring out all the things in their environment that's impacting their health and really teaching them about how to change their life. And even if you can't cure a disease, because most diseases are not necessarily curable, right? You can't just take a pill and the disease goes away.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's about recognizing that whatever challenges you face in your life, it's not the entirety of who you are. It just becomes part of your story, and you can use that part of your story to connect with other people and to touch people's lives. And so I've had, you know, patient that I took care of fired from his job for his neurological disorder, a job that he had, dedicated years to. And, he was coming to see me, and we got to talking about what his passion was in life, right? And so I encouraged him. I was like, why don't you start your own business? You never have to worry about getting fired for this neurological issue. This is what you're passionate about anyway. Why don't you go this route? It'll give you a certain amount of freedom. You don't have to worry about things. And this was a few years ago. And recently, sort of reconnected with him, does his own business. He's loving it, like he's much healthier. So his neurological symptoms are significantly decreased compared to where they were before. But all because he was willing to do the work and to change his life.
That's wonderful. That's transforming lives one person at a time. That's crazy. Do you want to share with I have audiences that are in all stages of life, some teenagers like myself, some are in the middle of their lives, and some are much older. Do you want to share some tips and ideas on how to take care of the most important tool we have
Yeah,
at every stage?
absolutely. So we touched a little bit about exercise, right? It's the
Right.
biggest promoter of neuroplasticity. That's your brain's ability to make new neurons and new connections. So you always want to make sure that you're exercising, and it's a it's a habit that you form that you're doing on a regular basis. No matter how old you are, you want to constantly be learning. And I've got two young sons that are 10 and 8, and I tell them all the time that the real learning starts when you graduate. It's not,
Hmm.
sort of the formal school learning. It's when you're outside in the real world. That's when the real learning starts. That's when you get to pick and choose what it is that you want to learn. But you constantly have to be learning and challenging yourself, because if you're not doing that, if you're not forcing your brain to evolve in that way, then that's almost equal to just killing your neurons, killing your brain cells, right? So whether it is,
Yeah.
learning a new language, interacting with people who don't think like you, doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but their perspective is really valuable. Picking up a new instrument to learn, picking up a new hobby. I'm a big believer in reinventing yourself every few years, right? So whether that's getting a new job, or just starting a new business, doing something else. You want to make sure that you're eating really healthy. You know, the reality is that it takes work to digest food, and as a
Mhm.
part of that process, toxins build up, and not just in your stomach, but those toxins can go to your brain and cause inflammation. So you want to make sure you're eating as healthy as possible. You want to minimize your stress, and you want to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, right? Because we know not getting enough sleep when you're 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60 increases your risk of developing dementia and Alzheimer's when you're 70, 80, and 90.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are some of the most well, they're silent diseases and very emotionally heavy to the rest of the family and people around you, as you were saying earlier. I think I missed asking you about neuroplasticity. Can you elaborate what it is and how? I pretty much were taught, but if you can put it in perspective so that the people understand better, they probably
Yeah,
heard it but never understood it.
yeah. So I wrote a book. The book that I wrote is called Neuroplasticity: Your Brain's Superpower. And so, what neuroplasticity is, it's about your brain's ability to make new neurons and new connections. It's about your brain's ability to adapt, learn, and heal even after somebody has had a brain injury. And so,
Mm,
like I said before, we used to think that the brain was pretty static, but we now know that the brain is constantly changing as long as you're giving the brain exactly what it needs to do so. And so, neuroplasticity is really about the brain's ability to evolve every single moment of the day.
are we talking about physically or uh, not physically?
So physically, so the creation of new neurons, new connections, as well as the brain's ability to change in the way that it's operating.
That's wonderful.
And some
Crazy.
of the stuff we know intuitively, right? It's the reason that you can learn things new. You can pick up a new instrument if you wanted to today. You can read a book. You can, learn a new game. It's not because, when people talk about things like, oh, muscle memory, when you do something
Mhm.
over and over, it's
Yeah,
not really muscle memory. It's your brain. It's the connections that are getting stronger in your brain for that particular activity, right? That's all about neuroplasticity.
crazy. Now we're putting the dots together. Thank you. um, Crazy. That's crazy stuff. And I see that. Well, I don't know much about this. That's why we have you here. What about the older population? As we get older, how does our brain change that allows us to learn more or retain more or less?
Yeah, so it all depends on how people are living their lives, right? I mean, preventable chronic diseases like high blood pressure and diabetes, those can have a really negative impact on the brain,
Hmm.
right? But your brain always retains the ability to make new neurons and new connections, but you've got to be giving it what it needs. So you've got to be minimizing your risk of those preventable chronic diseases. You have to be moving, right? You've got to be learning new things. I tell people all the time, you need to start acting like you're a child, like a 2, 3 year old child
Hmm.
who's exploring everything, who's talking to everybody, um, because that's really important for brain health.
Wonderful. I like that. Well, we're getting almost to the end of the 20 minutes. I appreciate everything you dropped. These are some really good tips and tricks. We probably, most people know that we have to do them and still don't. But when it comes from someone, an outsider, sometimes our brain, I don't know, at least in my circle, we seem to take more action on that. So thank you. Are there any last words before we go and start sharing about your online course and the book too?
Yeah, so I think, like I said at the beginning, the fact that our brains can change means that we can change and we can evolve past any life situation. So it doesn't matter what challenge you're facing in this moment. It doesn't mean that that's who you are, right? It may be part of your story, but it's not who you are. And you can start thinking about things a little bit differently and taking different steps in order to evolve past those situations. We're not sort of passively just waiting for our brains and lives to sort of deteriorate. Right?
Yeah,
We're very much active participants in our evolution, and
yeah.
I think that's really empowering to know.
It is. It is very empowering and profound and actionable, most importantly. So thank you. Thanks for sharing your time. Thanks for dropping so many nuggets. Now I'm ready to take action, and I'm sure that the listeners are going to do the same thing. We'll be sharing. Where can people find you before we go?
Yeah, so they can find me on social media. So they can find me on Instagram at Philippe.md, Philippe.md. They can go to my website, inlebrainfitinstitute.com. So INLEBRAINFIT institute.com. Or they can email me at philippedouyon@gmail.com.
Wonderful. We're gonna have the links down below. Make sure to reach out if you guys have any questions, any comments, and comment, like, and stay tuned for more interviews with great individuals like him. And thank you again. Hope to have you in the future again and sharing more information.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
You have a great day. Bye bye.